Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
The gang's all back together.
We're all here.
We're here. Happy summer. Has it been the first day of summer yet?
No.
Yes. No?
Nope.
Of June? Oh.
That's
Happy
weird.
spring.
I didn't think it was summer yet, but I
thought
did
it was
not
like
think it was
Memorial
that late.
Day. Like I thought it was
wild.
around then.
Probably because
That's
of
when they
school.
opened the pools and stuff like that in school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well.
But
Well-
according to the calendar,
Yeah. Screw the calendar. Anyways.
Bridget,
Anyways,
tell us what we're talking about
Yeah.
today.
What's going on? What are we going on?
so, we thought we would talk about when we're raising a dog, we want to talk about raising the adult dog and not the puppy. Because I think a lot of people, we've gotten a lot of puppy program recently. We just added it within the last year, I think. Maybe the last 6 months.
Yeah, within the last 6 months, probably.
And we've really intentionally, Michelle has created a perfect puppy program and kind of revised how we train puppies. We've gotten several puppies into board and train recently, so we thought we would want to talk about what we're focusing on and how that differs from like our full-grown adult dogs and things that we might be doing differently.
Because obviously we get so many different breeds and sizes and all that kind of stuff across the board. But I think what's super important when you're working with puppies is being mindful of the typical breed isn't everything, but being mindful of like the typical breed traits that the dogs are likely to have as adults, because you rarely ever are going to see those in puppies. You'll see. And so actually Ruger is a really good testament to this. So I didn't actually get my hands on Ruger until he was like 10 months old, I think. But they just got a new puppy, a boxer. And so they're going through our puppy program with her. And because of that, that's like sparked up a lot of conversation about, unfortunately, all of the like bad trainers that they had to go through before they ended up here with Ruger when he was young. And it was very sad. It was a lot of new information for me because I didn't really know kind of their back history of training with him before they got here. I just know that when we started our sessions, like she was like utterly convinced that like she was just very hopeless that like nothing was going to work, because he had really severe resource guarding issues. He had bit multiple members of their family. He's a Corso, by the way.
Pretty serious.
Yeah, very well-bred, serious, like a typical Corso. But the problem was that, and their breeders were like very supportive, still very supportive, and trying to give them a lot of resources and things like that. But along their journey, they ended up with a lot of trainers that just did not have the skill set or the knowledge to work with a dog of that caliber and know how to do it properly. And one of the first trainers that they worked with as a puppy with him was so combative. So like Ruger was displaying some resource guarding issues from the time he was young, as per usual with a Corso, likely. And the problem is that when you have these dogs that are very defensive, like possessive guardian type breeds, like if you go into your relationship with them as like, I have to win, and you see it as like a competition or like a dominance thing or whatever, then you're going to create so much unnecessary conflict and mistrust between the relationship with you and the dog. Because if he's already guarding things from you, your relationship is not good. That's not good. Something has gone awry somewhere. And so, unfortunately, the trainer was giving them terrible advice with this puppy of basically like setting him up, agitating him to the point of guarding, correcting the crap out of him, like just really, really awful, shitty advice. And that created so much turmoil and tension between him and those people in the house, because not only was he just doing an instinctual behavior, which if you know anything about dogs and you call yourself a dog trainer, you should know and look at that situation and be like, okay, this is not something that we can just correct out of this dog.
Right.
Like that's not
Right.
going to work. And then on top of that, now the dog doesn't even trust its owners. You've created this fear of his own owners where he's living on edge in his own house because he's like, they're going to agitate me and set me up and then all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's something that now years later, we're still seeing like little snippets of that, you know, like the damage that you can do to your relationship and your puppy if you are being misguided and given really bad information and not doing things that you should do or doing things that you shouldn't do can be really devastating sometimes, like lifelong with the dog.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so like passionate about training puppies and doing that and trying to create the best program we can for them, is because I don't want us to, you know, and not that we have been or most trainers would be, but I just never want somebody to end up in a situation like that where they came to somebody wanting good knowledge and wanting help and wanting guidance. And like, it's awful because that puts them in a position where they're like, we just feel guilty. Like we feel like we caused a lot of the issues. And it's like, no, the trainer did.
Yeah.
The trainer
Bad
who
advice.
either didn't have, you know, who wasn't humble enough to admit they don't know how to deal with this. This is outside of my skill level. Let me find you somebody who can help you. And instead led with ego.
Yeah.
Got you to this point where now your dog is the way that he is, unfortunately. So yeah, that's why, you know, with puppies, like I am so on top of it because I want to make sure that people get really, really good quality information right away. And we can set them up for the most like seamless, peaceful, congruent lifestyle with their dogs as possible.
And you can lead with a lot of positive reinforcement in that when we're raising a puppy properly, it doesn't mean to say that we're not eventually going to add adversives to the training. But I think, I don't want to lead with ego here, but I think a lot of the time balanced trainers are better positive trainers than positive only trainers.
Yeah.
Like if you ever overhear a PetSmart class, I'm going to go there. Please don't take your dog to PetSmart classes.
Don't do that.
It's just
They
like,
hire like high schoolers to be their dog trainer.
the information I was just like overhearing and the dog is just going ballistic and I'm just like, please don't do that.
Yeah.
And they're like, just the most ridiculous information. And I think if you're going to look at somebody that has a full scope of knowledge and has their eye on all of these new skills in dog training and is like always teachable as a trainer, you're going to get away with somebody that wants to explore with you, even if they don't know the answer. And if they don't know the answer, you know, they can work at different solutions with you and like create a stronger bond and lead with really like creating good habits rather than having to go back and destroy their habits that they've created.
Yeah, because I mean, when you have a puppy as like a blank slate, like the world is your oyster.
Yes.
You can make anything you want to out of that.
Yeah.
And it's so much harder to go back and try to reverse things that were done improperly than it is to just do it right from the beginning.
Even at 10 months old.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Especially
Yeah.
behavioral issues wise, like you have to be very careful when you start to see behavioral issues and have a game plan of how to address it and how to minimize it and how to have your dog stop rehearsing it, because you have to be able to move past it and you have to be able to see that and be like, absolutely not. We're working on this. This is not how my life with you is going to go.
Yep.
Because I don't want you to end up at a shelter and then euthanized.
Yeah. And like as an owner, then I think it's important to be super picky about who you allow to influence you on your dog and who you choose to go to for dog training. Because if you know you have a potentially difficult breed that is, and I say this a lot, but there's breeds that are like the margin for error is just so small in you know, comparison to other breeds. And if you know you have one of those, like, don't be somebody's guinea pig. Go find a trainer who's like,
Has knowledge
Corsos,
behind
I've
it.
been training those for 10 years. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But also can prove to you the quality of their work, you know, not just talk to you about it all day. That's super important. But you want to find somebody who actually knows what they're doing or has the support from people who know what they're doing. Because again, I'm, the first to say that I wouldn't have the knowledge I have of how to work with certain dogs if I wasn't able to have clients trust me the first time I worked with a Corso or whatever. So like, yes, to a certain extent, that's how you have to enable people to learn. But again, I was honest about it and I had resources of people who did have the knowledge that I was lacking that I could fall back on to support in those situations. But a lot of times you're dealing with a trainer who is just their own little thing and they don't have the knowledge or the resources or the mentors or whatever to help them at that point.
There's just like you hear horror stories about previous trainers. Like we all have dogs that are like, well, we went to training before you. And I'm like, all right, let me hear it. And it's just the most ridiculous advice. Like we just had a board and train in and the lady dropped off and she was just defeated. And she was like, this dog's barking is so incessant. She's like, I just want to cry. I can't get anything done. We can't do anything. And she was like, and we spent the last 6 months with a positive only trainer. And she said that we can never correct this and that we should be able to give her treats and food when she's barking at us, which further reinforced the behavior.
Yeah. Surprise.
Yes. And then we sent the dog home and no more barking.
6 months.
Yeah. So if a trainer is working with you for 6 months and there's no improvement, I think it's time to take a good look at what they're doing and start to be like, is this working? And if they're like, yeah, it's just going to take some time. Yes, some behaviors take time, but some don't.
No,
you
some
can
really
get
don't.
past like jumping and barking within.
If you're
like
having a
week.
mental breakdown just from having this dog in your house, you don't have time. 6 months is plenty enough time, like you said, where you should see some improvement, right?
Yeah.
If it's only going to get worse or if it's still the same, then you need to, you need to do better for your dog at that point.
Yeah. Stop wasting
For
your
your own
time
sake and
at
for the
people that
dog's
don't
sake.
have the knowledge or expertise to help you, and like look into good companies that have good reviews wherever you are in your state and be like, I'm interested in this training company, and ask your questions. Have you worked with this breed before? How much experience do you have with this breed? And it's okay to ask those questions and be picky.
Yeah. And look at their reviews. If they don't have reviews, ask if they have like referrals that you can call of clients that they've worked with.
If
You know what I
someone
mean? And
isn't
see,
willing to
like,
do that for you, move on to the next one.
yeah,
Yes.
red
Or if
flag.
they're not willing to answer your questions, move on to the next one.
Yeah. And it's really important to like really create a relationship with your trainer too, so they don't ever make you feel dumb or stupid or like exclude you out of the process. Like you want to know exactly what the person is doing and where they plan to go, so you can feel more at ease in the process of the dog's training.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that my dogs love me. I love that my dogs behave really well with me, even when follow-ups or even if it's months down the road and they come back for a follow-up or something like that. But that's not my dog. My clients should be the ones that are doing 99% of the work once they leave the board and train. Like it shouldn't be me constantly being like the shadow of kind of controlling the situations, because I'm not always going to be there.
Yes, and ultimately you want people to learn to work with their dogs, and that's the goal. The goal is not to train the dog exclusively. The goal is to train the human on how to train the dog, so everybody can live a cohesive life and we can help people enjoy their dogs so much more. Because if you're to the point where you're crying over behaviors, that's no way to live your dog's life. Like their life is short. We only get a small portion of life with our dogs on this planet, and I don't want to live even like 2 months with resenting or regretting my dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like a lot of the, actually it's probably only been 12 to 14 weeks since we implemented the puppy program, because all of my first puppies that signed up for it are now like graduating.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really only
That's
been
crazy.
like 3 months,
Yeah.
3-4 months. But like with one of them in particular, a little chocolate lab, she was like almost in tears at her first lesson, because I mean, if you've ever had a lab puppy, they're little terrors. Like they are just little terrors.
Yes, they are.
They will just come out of the womb trying to ruin your life. Well, actually, they'll kind of deceive you. Like
Especially
from 8
chocolate.
weeks, like if
I
you
love
get them at
you.
8 weeks old, up to like 10 to 12 weeks, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm a little potato, and I just want to lounge on the
how they get
couch.
you.
Want to
They
sleep.
just hook
Yeah.
you in.
Yeah. And then you get comfortable and you're like, wow, this puppy is so good. And then they hit like 14 weeks old and they're like, I'm going to murder you in your sleep. And
They're like,
they
and
fly
I'm gonna
off the
tear
rails.
everything in the house apart.
Yeah.
And I will jump into any pond or body of water I see.
And if you have small children, I will concuss them.
It's
Yeah.
like
By
that one
running
sound
full
on
speed
social
into
media
them, body
where it's
slam.
like, do, run.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
And so she was just like, again, utterly defeated. She's like, this dog is ruining our lives. Like, this is insane. I literally just gave her permission and gave her a schedule and was like, you need to crate him more. Like, he does not need to be out all the time when you're out trying to do things. And, you know, I gave her the schedule that I've made up for people, which just giving people a schedule that they can follow, game changer. The amount of people that get that schedule after the first week and then the second week, they're like, like 95% of our issues are gone because we're just like following this procedure of like what to do at certain times and how long to put them in the crate and all this kind of stuff. And so she had come back that next week and she was like, we can do it. She's like, I literally left the session, that first session with you, came home to my husband, and I was like, we're going to be okay. Like, this is going to be fine. We're going to do it. And then he just recently graduated this last week. And now he's like a little off-leash grown man. And she was like, she had told me, again, I didn't know, but she had kind of told me that they had seen one other trainer before they started the puppy program with us. And she's like, it literally was an hour. And by the end of it, I was like,
No.
that was garbage.
Yeah.
Just like,
You don't get
that
anything out of
was
it.
garbage. She's like, she didn't even do anything with the dog. I feel like I'm more confused than when I started this. I have no idea what I was supposed to be doing. It all seemed so ridiculous. She's like, so I called her afterwards and was like, we're going to go another direction. She's like, what direction we were going? I don't know. I just knew it wasn't that one.
Yeah.
And I was like, and that's like, trust your gut.
Yeah.
I think that there is a time and a place to like be self-aware enough to be like, okay, I don't have the skill to be able to train my own dog. I need somebody's help. But you're also not stupid.
Yeah.
Like if somebody seems like a quack, they probably are. And they probably don't know what they're talking about. It should make sense to you. Dog trainers should not be like this, like esoteric, like we're using these really specific words and big concepts and we're trying to make it sound so confusing and so crazy. Like, and if somebody is doing that, even if they're like good at what they do, that's just, you don't want to work with somebody like that.
Yeah.
It's like condescending and rude.
It is. It's
Yeah.
condescending.
Like Kayleen, that came to the Shadow program, one thing that she was talking about in one of the podcasts is she was like, people have busy lives and their job, they have busy jobs and they don't want to come home and learn about like the yes marker and heel positioning. They want a dog that they can hang out with and that's well behaved and can fit into their lifestyle without having to become a dog trainer themselves. And like that's so true. Like people, this is our whole life, which is why we're so passionate about it. But it is not other people's full life. It's a part of their life, and we have to figure out what solutions we can have so the dog fits into the background of their life.
Yep.
And it's not everything all the time, and they focus more on the dog than their children.
Yeah.
It's like, it does take work, but it shouldn't be your whole entire life, you know?
And that's like part of the fun for it to me.
Yes.
Is like figuring out how to like take all of the like stuff that I know is important, but is like uselessly complicated and that they don't need to know all the whys and this and that.
And you can do
but
it.
like make it into like an easily digestible formula for like a person. And I have some clients that are like, I want to know. Like they're little dog trainers and they do want to know and like they have the drive and I'm like, cool, then we will go down that path, you know, of I'll explain every detail to you along the way. And then you have those people that are like, I mean, I'll do whatever you say, and I don't need to know why. Just tell me what to do, and I'll do it. And if it gets me a nice trained dog, that's great.
Yes.
And like, that's great too.
The guy that I was just with is very simple. Like, and that's totally okay. He's had this breed for many, many years, and his paperwork was literally like, it was like, what are your goals? And he's like, whatever you think. And I was like, for a while, I was like, what do you want? He's like, I don't know. And he's like, just whatever you recommend. So I've had to really lead these sessions and be like, this is why I recommend this. Yeah. And then at a point, I was like struggling with something with the dog, and I was like, does he care about this? And I asked him, I was like, do you care about this? And he's like, no.
You're like, cool, now I don't either.
Yes. Yep. So now we can really focus and highlight exactly what he wants. And he's a simple man, very serious, very simple. And that is totally okay. He has a busy life. He wants this dog to not bark or jump on people. And that's basically it.
Yep.
That's awesome.
No, and that's such a good point. And I think there is that line then, and that comes with experience of like, knowing what things are okay to not care about, and then what things could be important to care about. And if the owner doesn't care about them, figuring out a way to communicate to them that like, but I think you should care. And here's why I think you should care.
Yeah. And why it has its purpose and things.
Like there's a lot of clients that initially are like, oh, I don't really care about the bed command. And I'm like, cool, I don't either. And then maybe like a few sessions in, they'll mention like, oh, like we're pregnant or we're gonna have a baby, or like there's kids, or like just little things like that, or like, oh, we have like grandparents that come over and whatever. And I'm like, a bed command can actually really come in handy for situations like that, because if you have your baby on for tummy time on the floor and you want your dog on the bed command, you want the dog out of the way when grandma's coming in the door with her walker, like there's a million things that it could apply to. And they're like, oh, actually that does make sense. Maybe we should do something like that. Yeah. But like initially, if it's not something that directly affects their life, and it's also not something that you see causing a potential issue with the dog moving forward, then like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Right.
If you don't care, I don't care.
I think like the puppy program as it pertains to the one-on-one sessions is really great how you're doing it and how you're like structuring it, where we're not immediately adversive. And well, sometimes, but we're starting to build the puppy's confidence rather than start at a place where we're correcting all of these nuisance behaviors that have happened. So I was like thinking in my mind, I was like, can we do a version of the puppy program in a board and train? Like, how would that work? Because there are things with puppies in a board and train program I do completely differently. And I focus, like Ted was one of them. Ted is a 6-month-old Doberman, and when he first came, he was terrified of everything. So in that first week, we really wanted to challenge and build his confidence and help him feel better. And we sure did that. And he was very confident. And I'm really happy with the way we did things with him. I'm thinking we're getting a chocolate lab puppy on Friday, tomorrow. And I'm like, how can we do things really mindfully with this dog? How can we set up good habits? Because these people are missing, 4 weeks of their dog's life.
Yeah.
And I really want them to get a dog back that they feel completely comfortable with, coming back. So,
yeah, no, I think that's important. And people are surprised, I think, how much you can do without having to use aversives with puppies. Like if you just know, like, again, the ratios of like how, like what their day should look like and how to schedule it properly. Like I said, a lot of people come in and their initial issue is like play biting. That's like the number one thing.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they follow the schedule, they're like, they don't do it anymore. I'm like, yeah, because you're not having them out at inappropriate times. They're not exhausted because they're actually getting the rest that they need. Like there's a million reasons. They're not eating my kids' toys anymore. They're not chewing the carpet. Yeah, because they're not out when you're sending emails for work, and then you look behind you and there they are. They're put away in the crate somewhere. So yeah, you can with puppies, like the more you can avoid them having access to doing inappropriate behaviors. Of course you won't have to correct them because they're not doing it. And then when it comes to like obedience stuff, I'm not correcting puppies for obedience. And then I'm certainly not even trying to really teach them obedience at a certain age. We're focusing more on like the neutral mindset and engagement drills and confidence building and all that kind of stuff. And so like there's literally no need really to correct for pretty much anything until the dog is probably halfway through the program at that point, like far more into the program. And then at that point, when you do introduce aversives, it's so crisp and it's so clear because like they have such a solid foundation underneath all of it that
you can like shape. Like I'm big and huge on shaping everything, whether that's like shaping with food or shaping with leash and prong. And we will use like a lot of leash direction initially with a board and train setting. And then I found myself recently, like I don't put an e-collar on until like week 3 or 4 of this dog's training. And then whatever, it's still going to be a very well-trained dog, but we'll continue to follow up with the owners and help them. But you don't need to go straight to adversives to get a dog to listen. And if you have to, then you're not a very good trainer. You know? You need to learn how to just take a leash and food and really help guide the dog and manage the dog properly. So like you said, they're not able to rehearse behaviors that we don't want them to rehearse.
Yeah. And to clarify, we're specifically talking about puppies. Yes. Yeah. There are some dogs, especially adult dogs, that when they start training, like you gotta
there's
come in a little bit firmer at times with certain behaviors. It's all just like context, knowing what you're looking at. Like there's even like I'll tell my puppy clients even like the first week, even if there are no concerning behaviors, I say this to almost like reassure them, and I think it puts them a little more at ease, where I'm like, every week you come, tell me everything as minimal or insignificant as you think it was that your puppy did throughout the week. Tell me all of it, and then I can let you know if that's something you should or should not be concerned about. And that way you don't have to worry about it. Like because a lot of times the play biting is like a huge concern. They think it's going to turn into something worse. They think whatever. And a lot of times it's literally the last thing on my list. I'm like, that is not a big deal. I don't really care. And then they'll mention something like, oh, like my dog I gave him like a pig ear or something. And like when the kid walked in the room, the dog kind of like turned his head away or something. And I'm like, that is something that we'll have to look at and dive a little bit deeper into and figure out how we need to manage that situation better or what we need to put in place. But like you look at that and somebody could think nothing of it, so.
Because it's not a problem yet.
Yes.
Whereas like the play biting, it's like you could see it as a problem because it's actively happening right now. But yeah, a lot of people that don't have the experience aren't looking ahead and seeing that as a prerequisite to resource guarding or something like that.
Or
exactly.
Like socialization, when people over socialize their puppies and you catch it at the perfect time and you're like, how about you calm down a little bit? And they're like, but I need my dog to say hi to everybody all the time. And you're like, no, you don't.
Yep.
And then you start to see like it click with them. And then I'm like, your dog needs to focus on liking you. And of course you can socialize them with a select group of people, but you should be being picky. It's not a toy at the park that all the kids can come running up to and grab their ears. And it's somehow going to make them never bite children. That's going to make them want to bite children.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you're forcing them into these situations, eventually they're going to be like, all right, well, I guess I got to stick up for myself because she's not or he's not going to let me do it, And
it's so hard for people like to be like, no, you can't pet my puppy.
Yeah, it is. It used to be hard for me.
Yeah.
But but that's what I always say is like, but then I had that like aha moment where I realized like, shit, I'm going to ruin my dog if I don't get my shit together, and start advocating for him and, so.
And the things that they tolerated as a puppy, like we can get away with it for so long and be like, that's never been a problem. Yeah. And then they reach maturity and then the things that were never a problem prior start becoming a problem and people are like utterly shocked. But hormonal changes, even if you spay, even if you neuter, they still have hormones. They still are going to go through puberty and they still are going to have a behavioral change in just what they're tolerant of.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Like if you have like a powerful breed and you're like, wow, they're such a friendly, easy puppy. Like that literally has no bearing on what they're going to be like as an adult.
It's like, are you the same person you were as a child?
Right.
Yeah. Like it's literally, there's no correlation there whatsoever. Like if you have a Corso and they love all dogs and they love all people and they're so happy to see all your guests and everything like that, do not be surprised the one day somebody jumps your fence to get their ball out of the yard and they charge the fence and bark at them and do something crazy.
Do Corso things.
Yeah, you don't get to see that and be like, oh no, where did that? I never expected that. Where did that come from?
That's why I get so worked up when people say, well, my dog would never blah blah blah. It's like,
my dog would never bite.
Yeah.
Does he have teeth?
right.
Do they have
Yeah,
teeth?
he does.
Is he a predator? I think he is. I think he
It
is.
is possible.
Yes, and just treating your dog like a baby is not going to get you anywhere. And being too emotional with the process of raising it and treating it like it's an infant child is also going to get you nowhere.
Right. It is an animal.
Yep. If you decide to get, that was like, I posted something on my Instagram story a little bit ago, but I saw there was a girl that was mauled by 5 English Mastiffs.
Oh,
Shit.
At her grandparents' house.
okay.
They had, like, she was going over there to pick up like a card or something that they had for her, and they had 5 English Mastiffs, and she's like walking up to the door and they didn't close the door all the way properly or something, and these dogs charge out of the house and like knock her off of the porch, slam her down on the ground, and then proceed to just attack her. And she had like massive head wounds and like hematomas all over her body and all this kind of stuff. And then the dogs were euthanized, which they should have been.
Yeah.
After this. And then I was like reading through the comments and somebody had asked, like, did your grandparents know that these dogs were aggressive? And she'd answered just yes. And like, you don't get to do that.
Right.
You don't get to do that. I'm sorry. You don't get to like use somebody else's traumatic event as your wake up moment to make decisions about your dog regarding their behavior. You get to decide when you have an aggressive dog and you know that they're an aggressive dog or they have aggressive tendencies. Mastiffs are historically a guardian type breed.
Yes.
They're very defensive dogs. Okay. Our English Mastiffs and Bull Mastiffs a little watered down to where they're probably the most mild of comparatively. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, maybe.
But I mean, when you have 5 of them,
yeah. Do they have the power to still do that?
And you already know that they're aggressive. You don't get to do nothing.
Right.
And then wait for this to happen. You either decide I'm euthanizing them or I'm training them.
Yeah.
Or I'm euthanizing 3 of them and training to you get to figure out and make decisions on how to make these dogs safe. And that's what's so frustrating and why I get so annoyed when people get really intense breeds and then want to play like denial all the way up until the dog becomes that dog and then does something and be like, oh, well, I mean, it's like, no.
He's never done it before.
Like, you don't get to do that.
Yep.
You don't get to go get a Corso or a Rottweiler or a Doberman or a Shepherd or a Pit Bull or a Mount, whatever. And then they behave that way once they hit sexual maturity. And then you use somebody else's trauma that you're responsible for as your wake up moment to do something with your dog.
You're like, oh my gosh.
You're like,
It's like
wow,
one of
they
those
bit somebody and they ruined someone's life. I guess I should do something now.
Yeah.
Right.
No. You
should
do
have done
you do
something.
that before. And like, again, if that has happened to you and you then did go get training for your dog and you took responsibility and you did it, I'm very happy you did that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to shame people over that. But I think culturally that's like a big change that needs to happen is like, stop waiting for the problem to exist before you see it.
Right.
And you're like, that could potentially be an issue. I should probably do something about that.
Yeah. And not and that's a good example of one of those extreme moments of management. You know, you said like the door wasn't closed all the way. So I'm sure there was a routine of making sure the door is closed so that the dogs don't get out and blah, 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 where it's just like, So if you are using management to that extreme, you need to get help. You need to get your dogs trained and do that.
Because management will fail.
Yes,
and
it works until it doesn't.
You need to have an emergency break.
Yeah.
And create good habits.
Nobody
Exactly.
needs 5 mastiffs. No. Listen.
No.
Come
I don't care
on.
how much land you
Like
have.
elderly
Just probably-
people at
Yeah.
That they
Okay.
just bred with each other and like
Probably. The girl said that her grandma literally had to come out and was like smacking them with brooms and baseball bats.
Oh, and I'm
and
sure
shit.
that did a lot.
I'm sure it really, really worked on those 200. That was like 1,000 pound of dogs
Yes.
attacking you.
Yep.
I can't even believe she survived.
I know.
Honestly, that's
I
like
was-
a recipe for death at that point. That is insane.
Especially
to me.
with them all
Yeah.
ganging up,
Yeah.
they're just gonna like amp all each other up.
Oh yeah.
yeah. So it's
Oh, that's terrifying.
definitely important to recognize, like, if we do have the ability to raise a dog as a puppy, like recognizing that they will change.
Yes.
Like, we can laugh about it now, but a couple of years ago, I did a board and train with this dog, and he was a puppy. And he came to our program, and by the time he went home, he was like reaching maturity. And I got this insane email from his owner, and it was we have lovely clients, but it was the rudest email. It was like just all in caps. Yes.
It was rude.
All in caps, and he was like, I took my dog home and my children were crawling all over him and he bit my children. He's like, you need to fix this immediately. The e-collar caused him to bite the children. And I just remember like going to David and being like, and David's on the phone with him and he's like, no,
Yeah.
this is not happening. And he set him straight, and the guy ended up like apologizing to me and being like, oh, sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Thankfully, like if
Got you a flower.
David will always have our backs, and I think
Yeah.
that's like he knows that we're competent and
Yeah.
we're professional, and like if somebody is like. Again, it does not happen often.
No.
Situations like
Very,
that do
very
not happen
rarely.
often. And I think that also, again, works in our favor that, like, we're good at our jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thankfully, he doesn't tolerate, like, rude behavior
And
like
it was
that.
absolutely
Where it's just mean.
insane behavior.
Yeah.
Like to think that like your dog would be programmed, and then the things that he tolerated as a puppy, your children crawling on them.
Yeah.
Once he was away from them and he was resetting back into the home, he was like, get off of me, and he was setting a boundary. And then for them to think that that was my fault.
Yeah.
Was absolutely ridiculous. And although it was ridiculous, it was a learning lesson for me. Like, what do I need to do differently in my send homes? Where do I need to drive the point home? Like, your dog is going to change.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you need to stop. What are all the habits in the household? What are our habits? What is the dog's habits? What are your kids' habits? So,
I think David is very fair in that sense too, where it's like if he would have thought that you were the problem, you would have had a talk. You know,
Yes.
like, I mean,
Yeah.
like there would have been a conversation there and stuff like that. But yes, but clearly, I'm sure once he heard all like of the actual issues, and unfortunately, the people have a way of just like outing themselves unknowingly to us. I think a lot of
they're
times.
unhinged.
Yeah, well, just in the way that they'll explain things, they don't think it's a bad thing, but then like as they're explaining the story,
Yeah.
like allowing the dog, you're like the second you hear that, you're like, your fault.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, so I'm sure once he heard all these things, he was like, got it, you're wrong, Bridget, you're fine. You know, but if it was like, yeah, I was doing my practice and blah, 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 and then it just turned manic and mauled me, you know, then that would have been a different story. But,
yeah. Or like in that scenario, I think David ended up going out to the in-home like within 24 hours of that email.
Yeah.
And he was like, went in and the kids' behavior was off the wall, and they were throwing things and crawling in his crate and jumping on him. And David looked at the lady and he was like, come on.
David's the last person
Come
you
on.
want in that situation.
Yes.
Right? It's like,
And
He has no patience.
yes.
are we seeing the same thing here? Like,
And then
man,
people
that's
just
funny.
like have this thing with their children that they think that like the dog's a toy and that the dog can do whatever you want. And if you're going to get a dog and you're going to have your children raise it, like grow up.
Yeah.
Like you have a personal responsibility to take care of this living being and not let your minor children make the decisions of what the dog does and the dog's potty schedule. Like if you're going to have a learning lesson for your dog, you have to help your kids learn how to care for the dog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like the puppy that I just started with today. He's the cutest little nugget. We talked, they have 2 young kids. And so I talked to them. Usually like the first puppy session is like, we'll do like really basic leash stuff, like a little follow me drill basically with food, and then handling drills. And as we're doing the handling drills, it's just like so much verbal information of getting like, what's your schedule like? What's, all the information I need. But when I found out they had kids, we went over a lot of the like, okay, so baseline rules for kids. Obviously, the traditional, like, no pulling, tugging, hitting, all that kind of stuff. But then 2 rules are no faces in face and no hugging. And every parent that I've told that to initially is like you can see in their face, like,
That's not gonna
how am I going to make that happen? Because
Yeah.
it's already been happening.
Yeah, you tell your kids no.
Yeah. And then, but like, as I explain it, like, they can't deny it's a bad rule.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, well, here's the thing. Like, and the way I tell people is I'm like, you will never know your dog doesn't like those 2 things until your kid gets bit in the face.
Yeah.
So those are your options. Either we just flat out, this is the rule, you are not allowed to do it. Or we allow it to continue. And then one day you find out that the dog actually isn't tolerating it anymore because now your kid's bleeding.
Yeah.
And now you have a weird situation to handle.
Yes.
And I've never had people like actively argue with me on that or anything. But it is like a moment, I think, for them to realize like, okay, so as much as we're here to train the dog, this is a lot of educational stuff on us on like how our lifestyle also needs to shift a little bit and our expectations for like what it's going to look like with the kids and the dog. And I was telling this client earlier today, I was like, listen, like as the kid gets older, yes, some of those rules can adjust a little bit. I was like, but at the age that they're at, they barely know human social cues, let alone dog social cues. So like if your child is incapable of looking at a dog and being like, that dog is uncomfortable, they don't want me engaging with them, then you need to have those blanket rules in place because they can't read nuance yet.
Yep.
Like as my stepson's gotten older, now he can actually like pick up on stuff like that where he's like, like sometimes like Snoopy's okay with me kissing him on the head, and he likes it or whatever. And he can tell in his body language. He's like, and then there's times I can tell when he's laying down and resting and I'll go over and pet him. Like I can tell that like, that's just not the time, like I can tell he's resting. He doesn't want to be bothered and stuff. Not because he's doing anything inappropriate, but he can read it now that he's older and he's more like, emotionally sensitive and stuff like that. So, but with young kids, I find it's just so much easier to make the rules just like clear cut. No hugging. Don't put your face in their face.
Yeah. And because and kids have like a rebellion. They're not gonna listen 100% the first time you tell them, especially if it's already habit to want to hug the dog. But if at least they know that it's wrong and you can catch them 1 or 2 times and reinforce, hey, remember I told you that we don't do that or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. The probability of them continuing to do it so often will hopefully get further and further apart.
Oh, for sure.
Which, like you were also saying, like hopefully gives you a higher percentage of a chance that the dog isn't going to bite them. You know what I mean? Because if it's every morning before school or something, they're giving this dog a bear hug or whatever, and it's just beyond that routine, the dog's going to learn that and start to resent that kid or whatever, nip at him or something. But if we can at least try, be the parent and try to help that situation, you're already setting yourself up for a higher percentage of success.
Yes, there was a time in my life that I hated dogs.
Really?
Like, I was like in the
Did you get bit by a dog or something? 3 times. I was
like in the.
Were they your fault?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like in the like 2nd grade, 3rd grade era, and we had this old spaniel, and she was hated me. She hated me, and
Was
I
it a
hated
Cocker
her.
Spaniel?
Yes.
They hate kids.
Yes.
They really don't like
And she
kids.
was like under the table, and I was like, I want to be friends with you, so I'm going to crawl under the table with you. Bit me in the face.
Yep.
Terrible.
Yep.
And my mom was like, what are you doing? And then it was eating, and I wanted to try some of the kibble, so I crawled over on my hands and knees because I was pretending to be a dog.
Oh my god!
And I was like, I want a little bite of that. And I went to take a little bite, and the dog was like, get the fuck away from me.
Valid.
Got bit in the face again.
You keep putting your face where it shouldn't
Yes.
be, Bridget.
No face to face.
And my brother did the same thing where, like, he went to go take a bite out of the dog's food.
Where were your parents?
I don't know. There was a lot that happened in my childhood. So for a while, I was like, I'm a cat person. And
Yeah.
for like, I'd say like a good 3 years, I was like, I only like cats.
Yeah.
And then I explored dogs again and realized and recognized as I was getting older what they don't like
Yeah.
and what they like. And now I'm a dog trainer.
Yeah. Look at you. What a comeback story.
I wonder why every once in a while I
Yeah.
see you taking a little treat out of
I
the-
know,
out of
and
the treat
eating
pouches
it.
here, you know?
Old habits die
fine,
screaming.
yeah.
You know?
Oh my gosh.
But you
that is
know,
ridiculous.
Abby, if you're watching this, I hate you.
was it a Cocker Spaniel named Abby?
Abby?
Why are they all named Abby?
Yes, it was a brown and white Cocker Spaniel. I always remember that dirty little.
If you're watching this,
They always have ear
35-year-old dog
Yes.
right now.
They always have ear infections. They're always smelly and
Yeah.
greasy.
Yes. Yep.
They always have mats behind their ears.
It was
Oh,
so
yeah.
unfriendly, and I don't know why my mom continued to let this vicious dog around her children. But we had it until 4th or 5th grade, and then it finally passed away. And I was like, "Bye, Abby."
Did you kill it?
Yeah, I killed it. People are gonna clip that and be like,
Yeah.
"She's a dog killer."
She killed her childhood dog.
Yes.
That's
So-
really funny. Oh, and the also thing, we can wrap this up soon, but the other reason I make that hard and fast rule for kids with dogs is because I explained to this client today too, is I was like, you may have a dog that for whatever reason tolerates
Yeah.
stuff like that, but
a good
you
point.
then set your children up to think that
All
all
dogs
dogs,
are like
are
that.
going to tolerate behavior like that. And they're not going to.
Mm-hmm.
So you should teach your kids to interact with every dog in a baseline, very safe way.
Those are
when
the
they're young.
kids that run up to us at the park and stuff
Yes.
because I'm sure they have a dog that they go and they can hug
Yes.
and do all that stuff. So they see every dog and they want to just run right up to it.
Yep, exactly. So
Don't let your kids do that.
Yeah.
don't let your
stupid.
kids do that.
If I have a child ever, I'm gonna just have a hard and fast rule: you're never allowed to ask to pet a stranger's dog. I'm
my
never gonna
stepson
let
isn't
you go.
allowed.
Yeah,
He's not allowed.
it's not a toy, you know. And I'm never, even if the owner's like, "Oh, they're friendly."
I saw
Yeah.
one time, and this might have just been in passing, but I have made it in my mind that this is a thing. But I was at Edgewater one time, and we had passed by this younger kid, and he had counted. He said a number, right? And so I was like, I made up in my mind. I'm like, that'd be kind of a good thing of just count the dogs. You don't have to pet the dogs. You don't have to say
Yeah.
hi to dogs, but just have it be
Yeah.
an activity where the kid's
That's cute.
4.
Yeah.
5 dogs.
would be
So
cute.
it's yes, it's okay to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
That is a dog. Good job. You got
Yeah.
it. But
That's
That's
so
it.
funny.
Just like we
I
don't
love
talk to
that.
stranger humans, we
Yep.
don't go up to stranger dogs because
Yep.
we don't know them and we don't know what they're capable of.
Yep.
And I'd like your face to remain, unscarred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and actually, speaking of when you work with your kids and their manners around dogs and stuff like that, my stepson had a neighborhood friend over the other day, and Snoop and Cash were both out because they're very social with people. And I overheard the friend ask my stepson, "Oh, am I allowed to pet your dogs?" Which I thought it was really cool that the kid asked first. And his answer, I was so proud of him, and I told him later, and he goes, yeah, I mean, they're very nice and stuff. He's like, but I would just wait if they come up to you and they want petted. He's like, I wouldn't go chase them down,
Yeah.
pet them. He's like, but just if they come up, you can put your hand down and see if they want it. And I was like, what a good answer. You know what I mean? So nice, right?
Bravo.
I was very proud of him. I was like, good for you, bud, for,
Yeah.
advocating for them and, you know, knowing like their personalities and stuff like
Good,
that.
yeah.
So
That's awesome.
That's how you should raise your children.
Yep.
And you shouldn't raise them to think that they can ride your dog like a pony or pull their ears
Yeah.
and then get mad when the dog reacts. And then you're like, now I have to put my dog down.
Yep.
yeah, I've kind of made him into a dog snob a little bit.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we'll be out places and he'll be like, oh, did you see
Yes.
that dog?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, okay, let's not get too judgy.
Right,
okay.
right.
Justin's like that too. Like if we see anything that, I'm sorry, people, but if we see anything that has any sort of pit bull in it, he is picking the dogs up, and walking away. And actually, we went to the park, and in the distance, we see he's like, "That's a pit bull," and picked Pip Squeak up, and I was like, "Is that Papa?" My like one-on-one client, and it was Papa.
It was
Oh,
Papa.
And I was like, my husband just embarrassed me because your dog is very good. But
That's so funny. That's really funny. And listen, I mean, you guys have very small dogs.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, unfortunately, that own pit bulls cannot be trusted. So I don't necessarily blame him for being a little more
It's all right.
eyes out there.
yes, yeah.
It's definitely good to be aware of your surroundings.
For sure.
But,
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us today, guys.
yeah. Hope it helps.
Educate the children in your lives
Yeah.
Educate the children.
about dogs.
And the puppies.
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
See you
Cool.
next time.
See you later.
Bye.